For our homework today, we're gonna include parentheses. When we have parentheses, we're gonna get rid of the parentheses. We're gonna use what we call the distributive property. Now, the distributive property means that the term that is outside of the parentheses, we're gonna multiply it to the terms inside of the parentheses. Notice I said terms, as in plural, inside the parentheses. I usually expect more than one term. Most of the time it's two, but sometimes it might be three or more. So in this case, let me multiply the term on the outside. In this case, at -3, I'm gonna go -3 times n, and then -3 times a +10. Now, when I multiply a number with a variable, I just combine them. So -3 times n, I'm just gonna call that -3n. Then I also see -3 times 10. That's going to give me -30. Remember, negative times a positive is a negative. Multiplication, when the signs are different, the result is negative. So -30. Now there's a -7 here. That is not quite with the parentheses. That's a little bit separate. So I'm going to call this just a -7. Now, one thing, some people might wonder, how do I know which number do I multiply to the inside of the parentheses? Do I multiply the -3 or do I multiply the -7? The number you're going to multiply is the number that has nothing in between such number and the parentheses. Notice how the 3 and the parentheses, there's nothing in between them. They're just actually put together. That's how I know I'm going to multiply the -3 to the inside. Now the 7, I don't multiply the 7 to the parentheses because there is a minus sign in between them, right? There's something in between the parentheses and the number. So that's why I don't multiply the 7 to the inside. Okay, so now that I got rid of parentheses, let me combine my like terms. First of all, I look at those that have a variable. Remember, variable is basically a letter. So I'm looking for those that have a variable. In this case, it's just a -3n. So I'm just going to copy -3n. And then I look for those that don't have a letter, -30 and a -7. Signs are the same. They're both negative. So when the signs are the same, I'm just going to add my numbers and keep the sign. So I'm going to call this -37. So my answer should be -3n -37. At the end, I cannot combine those two because one of them has a letter, one term has a letter, and the other one does not. All right, let's take a look at question number 10. I'm going to multiply the 3 to the inside. I'm going to go 3 times 3 and 3 times 4x. Now I know 3 times 3 is 9, so I'm just going to write that 9. Now 3 times 4x, that's going to give me positive 12x. Notice I just multiply my numbers, 3 times 4. One of them had a variable, so I just copy the x. And at the very end, there's a plus x. It has nothing to do with parentheses, so I'm just going to copy as a plus x. Okay, so now let me combine my like terms. I start with the terms that have the letter. 12x plus x. So basically 12x plus 1x. I know 12 plus 1 is 13. So I'm just going to call this 13x. Now, when it comes to terms that don't have a variable, I only see a 9. So plus 9, right? It's positive, so I write it as a plus. So 13x plus 9. All together, no spaces in between them. Whenever you guys type in your homework, it's all together. All right, let's take a look at question number 11. First of all, let me multiply the number outside of the parentheses to the terms inside of the parentheses. Again, we might be confused. Do I multiply this 6 or do I multiply this 4r? Now, it is not the 4r because there's a plus sign in between the parentheses and the 4. So it's not that term. It is the 6. I'm gonna go 6 times a negative 6 and 6 times 8r. I know 6 times a negative 6 is a negative 36. Right? I know 6 times 6 is 36, but positive times a negative. In multiplication, when the signs are different, my result is negative. So that gives me a negative 36. And then 6 times 8r is going to be positive 48r, right? 6 times 8 is 48. And I copy the r. At the end, I do have a plus 4r. So my first step was get rid of parentheses. Now let me combine those terms that have a letter. So I see 48r and positive 4r. I know 48 plus 40 is 52. So I'm going to call this 52r. Notice I'm not changing my variable. It's just an r. Now, with terms that don't have a letter, the only one that I see is a negative 36. So let me just write this as minus 36. Lastly, let's take a look at number 12. I'm going to multiply the 3 outside of the parentheses to the terms inside. 3 times m is just going to be 3m. A number times a variable, we just combine them. Okay, now 3 times a negative 10 gives me a negative 30. And there's a minus 3 that has nothing to do with parentheses. Now, when I combine my like terms, I look at those that have a letter. I only have a positive 3m. So just write 3m. When it comes to terms that don't have a variable, I see negative 30 and a negative 3. They're both negative, so they have the same sign. So I'm just going to add the numbers and keep the sign. So my answer will be negative 33. So 3m minus 33.